Hello, everybody. It is the first Facebook Live of the week. I'm so excited to see you again in a new week here in February, where the polar vortex has somehow dipped down to snow and ice in Houston. So I am especially excited to have somebody to help us warm up today in my guest, Felicia Barlow-Clar, who has a very unique line of work that I'm excited to share with you all because it is one of those things we never, ever think of. And we should. And we should for our own sakes and for the sakes of the people we love. So I'm excited to have you here, Felicia. Thanks so much for joining us on this call.
Thank you.
God. So tell us a little bit in your own words what you do and what you provide, and then I will dive in with all my curiosity questions.
Okay. I offer alternatives to funeral home celebrations. I like to think of my celebrations of life as joyful versus the sad, typical service that we're so used to.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're all used to, you go to the funeral home, you might do the viewing, you'll have a religious ceremony where you may share some celebrations or things you remember, those kind of things. What do you do to take it out of the ordinary and make it extraordinary for that family or that group of friends or whoever it is that's doing the celebration of someone's life?
I try to really focus on the person. Like, I think funeral homes so much focus on the people that are left behind, the grief. And I try to focus on the person and their life story.
I love that. I love it. So you bring elements of that in to the planning?
Yes.
Okay, very cool. I think of it, and this is why I have so many questions. I'm so curious about this. Is it almost like an event planner? The event just happens to be a memorial service? Like, do you cover, like a wedding planner would help work on the wedding in the church, and then they'd work on the party afterwards? Do you cover all those bases, or?
That's exactly what I do. That's the world I come from. I've done weddings. I've done huge events. And that's what got me to niche down to this, because I saw a tremendous need for it. In fact, I struggled with it at the beginning, even with my own coach going, am I doing the right thing? Am I the right person to do this? And my coach said to me, she's like, Felicia, you're just an event planner. You just happen to do it at the crappiest part of somebody's life. And I was like, well,
and when they most need something taken off their hands, like there's to think through just having somebody to turn that over to the same way you do a wedding or any event is pretty amazing, because at that point in time, there's so much overwhelm that not having to think through that, to me, the benefit is massive.
That's absolutely why I decided to do it also, is because being the person in my family that was the event person, the last two services that we had, which was my stepfather and my sister, everything got turned over to me. I mean, to the point that my oldest sister has no clue that I'm the one that did everything with the funeral home.
Oh my gosh.
Right. She was like, but they did a great job. I don't understand why you started this business. I'm like, because I did 99% of the work.
Because they did exactly what I told them to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is awesome. So this, to me, is the kind of work that has to be a very strange kind of gratifying, because I'm sure in grief, people are glad for the relief, but still kind of shocked or dumbstruck by what they're dealing with in the death and the moving on and the celebration of life. Do you feel the obvious impact of what you're doing in the moment, or do you tend to hear from people later?
I feel it in the moment. I mean, I'm working with a family right now that suffered tremendous unexpected loss in January, and it having to navigate around certain things. I'm an empath, and thank God that I am, because I can feel the pain, and so I know when not to put too much pressure.
Got it.
On them about what I need and when.
That's actually interesting that you talk about being an empath, because a lot of the coaches in this group and in this space are empaths. And one of the things that I find interesting about empaths when I talk with them is that it can be overwhelming. So you're dealing in, like, there's nobody that I have more respect for than people that work in hospice,
Mhm.
who are also empaths. And I guess I struggle with, how do you deal with all of that emotion as an empath? You let it in, right? Like that, isn't that part of how you deal with things? Like, how do you function if all that emotion of theirs is crossing over into you?
It is, but I think because I've been so involved in metaphysics and the spiritual community for, going on 25 years, that I
Wow.
learned how to build up boundaries and kind of
Yeah.
know when to step back. And that took a lot of work.
Oh, I'm sure. So you've got the experience of knowing and understanding how the universe and God and whatever people call it are all connected, and we're moving in and out of different types of realities all the time. So you also have a perspective on it that a lot of people don't
Yeah,
have. Whereas passing may mean one thing to me, you see it from a totally different, more holistic perspective.
I do.
Wow, do you find it? I would bet you're tempted to help people see that broader perspective, but they're not with you at a time when they're going to really be open to that.
Right. Yeah. That's the hard part, because there's a lot of times when I can kind of go, well, there's your family sending you a message right there.
Yeah.
And most people don't want to hear it. So it can be a matter of like how you say things, like, oh, well, they live forever in your heart, or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, like for my own experiences, I honestly look to things like, I get mail from my sister all the time, and people think she's nuts,
but you do.
Sister. Yeah.
Wow. So, well, that's what I'm thinking. You probably see, and tell me if this is true or not true. Do you see and receive messages from the family members who have passed a lot when you're working with your clients?
I do. I mean, I tend to not be as open to that, because
Got it.
part of me, like, unless somebody is really forceful, there's sometimes spirits are really, they want you to know.
Wow.
But I wouldn't say that that's my gift.
Got it. Got it. So there's sometimes you just can't miss it, but you're not out there picking, focusing on that. You've got another job to do.
Right. Like, I'm very intuitive, and I kind of get when I get it, especially when I cry. That's when I know it's for sure.
Okay. Then
Yeah, but it's not really the thing that I tap into.
Yeah.
I know so many spiritual people are, intuitives and psychics that are much more gifted in that area than I am.
Interesting. So if you do get some sort of an insight or a message, do you share it with the family? Do you ask permission? How do you handle that? Oh, I lost you there. Oh, we're not hearing you. Let's see, is your mic working? Oh, it looks like you're on mute. Let me see if I can, there we go. Whoop. There we go.
It was me. I was playing with my AirPod thing. So
no worries. No worries.
I'm not the techie person.
So if you do pick something up, do you share it? Do you keep it to yourself? How do you make those decisions?
I share with people that I'm very close to. Like with my husband, I share all the time if I'm hearing something from his sister or something, but I don't tend to share so much with my clients.
Yeah, I can see why. It's got it, because you're in such a strange place. I know that we've had family members and very close friends pass, and I remember struggling with, I know I got a message through someone else from the dearly beloved of someone who had just died, within the last couple of years. And I know it was a message they'd want to hear, but I struggled for months before I finally approached her and said, okay, this thing happened. I don't know what to make of it. Do you want to hear it or do you not want to hear it? And that, I think, was really the best way to handle it was, and I didn't know any better because I don't normally get insights like that. So I can't imagine kind of being pummeled with them all the time.
Yeah.
Going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I'm just better with my own loved ones too.
Oh, that's probably true.
Yeah.
Well, you're probably more attuned to them as well.
Yeah.
So what do you like as people, entrepreneurs in this group that might be watching this who, may not be facing imminent death or have a family who's facing imminent death? What are some of the things we ought to think about that And what is a way we can talk about them and think about them that doesn't feel like it's closing in, that instead feels like it's opening us up? Do you have any insights into that? Are there things we should be doing today as we think through our own journeys?
I'm a big one now on planning ahead. I said I've just written 2 workbooks. One is an end of life planning workbook that explores everything from putting down your passwords to what you will do with your pets. And then I wrote another one, which is a celebration of life planner, like literally sitting down and planning your celebration of life.
I love that.
Yeah. Because it's just so important.
I really like the first one because, again, in the one situation I know of where there was a sudden death, those little things, all of a sudden, what should take 30 seconds to do takes days and days. And it's just, it's petrifying. So you're going to have a workbook on the stuff that you really ought to just get documented somewhere and tell your most loved where it is, it sounds like. Okay. And even go over it with them.
Yeah. And the thing, I mean, there's quite a few of them out there. I mean, you can find them on Amazon, but I would say that I'm so proud of mine because mine include the death positive movement and all the options that are out there that people do not know exist.
Talk to me about what is the death positive movement?
It started roughly like 8 to 10 years ago. And it was, first of all, getting us to talk about death and mortality because we are so afraid to in this country. I mean, in most countries, but this one especially. I love what that person just said. Isn't that nice? It's so sacred. I call myself a sacred life celebrant because it is such an honor to be with somebody in that moment.
In that moment. Wow. Yeah. Okay.
But
so death positive. Sorry, I just saw that and wanted to share.
Yeah, it's a movement that was actually started technically, the person that's giving the credit for it is a mortician who worked in a funeral home, I believe, out in California, who saw things in the industry that she didn't like.
Okay.
So she started talking about death on Twitter because she saw a tweet about the sex positive movement. And she's like, okay, but why is nobody talking about death? So that's how it got termed that. And it now involves so many different kind of practitioners, from end of life / death doulas to people like me planning celebrations of life. There's only a handful of companies like me that I know of. I mean, we're starting to see more and more ways of disposing of bodies. A big one that just came out within the last few months that I think was finally approved is composting bodies. Oh. Yeah. I mean, you can send your body off in fireworks. There's underwater reefs that are beautiful.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's so much out there.
So much we haven't thought about. So what are the main kind of vision or guidelines or emphasis that the death positive movement's trying to get out there into the world, other than just talking about it more?
A big one is the planning ahead.
Okay. Actually saying, hey, if I want my body to go up in fireworks, I'm going to go ahead and write that down on a piece of paper.
Yeah, that's a big one that even funeral homes push for a lot, is because it's all left to people. And you said when you're grieving, that's the last thing you want to do is find out where passwords are.
True.
Yeah, and roughly 70% of the population does not plan ahead. We just leave it
at all for this.
With it.
Even the population that does have, unfortunately, some lead time into knowing their passing. Okay.
Right.
And that is the piece that I'm the executor for my mother's estate, and I had everything. I've been her power of attorney for years, so I knew her passwords and all of that even better than she did. And she was 93, led an amazing life, all of that. But even with all that information, it was still hard to get through all the technical obstacles you have to get through just to operate in that executor role.
Yeah.
And it's taken a year, and we're still ironing out some of the things. And that's with, like I said, knowing her passwords better than she did. So that's such a huge thing. When will that be available, Felicia?
My book?
Yeah, the books.
I'm hoping within the next 3 weeks. That is my goal.
When they are, let me know, and we'll drop the link in the Facebook group here. Okay. So, yeah. What are a couple tips you can give us? Just, easy. I know certainly planning is one of them, but as we think about approaching a conversation like this with our family to say, here's my end of life planner. What are your thoughts about how to do that, especially with, kids and that might not be wanting to hear something like that? How do we start that conversation?
Wow, that's a tough question. Because, I mean, because I resort to my spirituality and my belief system, it makes it easier for me. But I think it is just sitting down with somebody and kind of coming to terms that we are all going to pass. And that's the thing that we tend to forget in this country is it's true. Inevitable. So
that and taxes. That's why you and I are talking.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. There are guidebooks out there. I saw somebody had posted underneath your post about this. The Conversations Project is one of them. I did
see that. Yeah, that's to get information from people before they die, right? Like historical. Yeah. I saw that at one point and was really, really, really intrigued by it. It's such a great idea so that those stories don't vanish forever.
Yeah. And then there are another part of the death positive movement. This started in 2011 in the UK, are death cafes. Those are not grief or support groups. They are so people can just talk about mortality. And they can be fascinating. And they're all over the globe now. There's more than 10,000 of them around the globe. You just look up cafes.com and you can find one near you. And of course, right now, most of them are happening virtually.
Online, yep.
Online.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It helps take some of the drear out of the thought process, I think, knowing that, hey, this is something I can plan for and make it a celebration. And it helps us to think through what we really do think in our faith or in our spirituality or in whatever it might be, and even transfer some of that to the people who will be, executing the plan at that point as well. I mean, there's just so much room for more real in-tune conversation with the people you care about if this is one of the topics on the table, I think.
Yeah.
There's
another group called Death Over Dinner, which is, all about having, literally.
Not to be confused with the murder mystery dinners, right?
It's similar to death cafes, but a little bit more formal.
Okay. Yep. I love that. If you want just a cup of coffee, you can go to the death cafe. If you're all in, you can go to the Death Over Dinner. And it's really that gets conversations around these topics then.
It is. And it's funny you mentioned that because the death cafes, that is the only rule they have is that you serve cake, tea, and have a conversation like without an agenda. And
oh, cool.
Because it really is a social franchise.
Event.
Yeah. So they want it to be very, kind of laid back and talk about.
Well, this is really, if people have questions for you, you're one of those topics like mine that I imagine people won't as much ask questions in the group publicly, but they might have questions. What is the best way to reach you? Your website?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm going to drop that information which you've given me into all of the comments where this is going so that people can find you if they want to. And you'll surely be announcing the book on that website, but please, please, please do come back into the Prophet Concierge group and let us know too, because and I'll bring this feedback up so that people can remember the conversation. I'm just checking to see if there are any questions here that we want to.
I would say my books are on my resources page on my website. They just
great.
don't have any way to buy them yet.
Oh, perfect. And I wrote down.
But yeah,
I thought I wrote down your website, but let me get that again. What is the website?
It is celebratingthedash.com.
That's it. I did. I wrote it down. I just didn't recognize it as a .com.
Yeah.
Celebrating, and I'll just drop it right in here. Celebrating.
My company is Epilogue Tributes, but which they can get to that way too, epiloguetributes.com. But if people know the poem about the dash, that's where I got the Celebrating the Dash inspiration.
Oh, okay. I don't. What's the story? What's the story of that poem?
Well, it's a lovely poem, but it's all about the life lived between birth and death, the dash on a tombstone.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah. So that's my whole premise is, celebrating that
dash.
The life of somebody.
Awesome that you got that URL.
Surprisingly, like I plan on trademarking it because there's very little out there in terms of I'm the one using it. So I'm like, it's mine. I love it.
That is fantastic. All right. Well, I've posted that here in the website, guys. You can reach out there, reach out in the comments here to Felicia. She'll be glad to answer you. DM her. I can't thank you enough for coming on. It's really neat for me to have such a different topic in this series because it is one of those things that is like Valentino pointed out, how do we instill, in fact, I'll post it. How do we instill a business mind frame and take the emotion out while planning ahead? And it's interesting because I don't know that I'd take the emotion out, but it would be really cool to plan ahead because it helps everybody else feel the emotion they need to feel, but it helps you deal with, these are the things I really want involved in my celebration of life kind of thing. It guarantees some, that it really is what people want because, they always say at funerals, oh, so-and-so would have hated this. If it's a sad, morbid, droll, and it doesn't pick up on their sense of humor or their passions and that kind of thing. It's just so cool to know. Are you still planning events in this COVID world? Because you can't go plan one in person now. How do you do that? Or are you still doing that at all for people if they have questions?
I have not been doing live, but there are virtual. And like I said, the one I'm working with right now is a virtual video service. We're doing almost like a mini documentary about. Man. Yeah. So virtual is definitely something I'd have to say, funeral homes have offered virtual for years. It's nothing new. They're just not good at it. I mean, I hate to it, but I come from a video production background too. And I'm like, they don't know what they don't know.
Oh, and that's awesome. That could make something really fun out of things. And then something people can take with them in an MP4 and have it forever. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
What fun. Yeah. Well, any other things that you want on this topic or any topic to drop in here as nuggets for us at this point?
My whole thing is, like you just said, the thing about the person not, necessarily wanting to be remembered in a certain way. The whole reason I started this was because of my sister. When I was planning hers, like your guest there said not to put emotion into it or trying to not. That was exactly the opposite of what I did with my sister because she was so funny and that life of the party type that at the end, I had my family get up and dance, and you could just see the people that knew my sister jump up and dance with us.
I love it.
Laughing and dancing and having a good time because that's who she was.
That's beautiful. Yeah. So I think that's a great way to leave this. We want to make it a reflection of that person and the impact they had on us.
Yes.
And I just love that one ended with dancing. I know a lot of friends of mine, it would end with dancing and partying. They wouldn't want me to dance because I can't keep the beat in my life, but they would want me to try so they have a good laugh at it.
Yep.
So, all right. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic Tuesday. I believe I see you again on Thursday this week. I'm looking forward to that. But this has been, I think, one of our most interesting topics yet in the Facebook Lives, and I really appreciate your jumping in and sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.